Pay no attention to the lack of fire, as we have plenty of chat to make up for it. With me today, well, correction, I am your host today. I am with me today. I am Aaron Bagelman, and with me today, as always, is the all-father of Pendlehaven himself, Andrew Velkuskas, who I actually pronounced his name right, I
Yeah,
think.
what's going on with you today?
I don't know. I think I'm feeling a little sick. I should get checked. And of course, also with us is the unstoppable seller of merch, Rich Bush. And last but not least is our guest, the great Alex Kramer, gamer, writer, and creator of GameholeCon. But let's hear about it from the man himself. So, Alex, we always like to start off by just letting the guests kind of give a little bit of a self-introduction and just kind of giving our audience an idea of who you are and what you do.
Oh, okay. I guess the best way to put it is that I'm a professional knucklehead. I am a wastrel, foolish person who gets involved in bad ideas that spin out of control, and now have achieved a bit of notoriety because of it. So that's really the short version.
I think Alex is more like a man of all seasons. You need to share a little bit of the secrets tonight on how you do your time management. So, I mean, you practice law, you've got several businesses, you run a convention, you have find time to design and write books. What's the secret, man? Where's the TARDIS hiding in the game hole?
Yeah, so that's funny you mentioned that. Actually, I came in hot today, late in the afternoon, to my office, and my two paralegals are standing there talking. I had gone to the Alliant Energy Center, just where GameholeCon was 2 weeks ago, and I had to run over there because we left some shit there I had to go pick up. It was basically these cool tablecloths that we use for the D&D Adventures Hall there, because we have a big Adventure Hall, Adventures League presence, as you guys know if you visited the show. So I came in, and my two paralegals are standing there talking, and they're having this conversation about, what is a sitcom? What is this kind of show? How would you separate Friends from, say, the Party of Five to modern shows and all this kind of stuff? And they're asking me, Alex, what do you think about these subjects? And I said, I am uniquely bad. I'm in a uniquely poor position to answer those questions because I'm so goddamn busy that I can't watch television like that. I do watch some, but I don't watch a lot of these shows. Like once like the Marvel stuff, when it dumps, I'll watch it and with my kids and stuff like that. But when it comes to like serialized television, I just can't, because there's just so much room in the day, as you mentioned, and that's what it is. So you just have to, if you love other things, you make room for those things, and that's just it. So I don't know how to answer it any better than that.
And my hat's off to you, because I mean, I was surprised to see you with a power drill in hand taking down the sign in the front of the convention center, because there are so many owners of conventions that I see them just walking around with a clipboard, pointing to people, and you do this, you do that. And here's this CEO just like hands and knees on the floor, unscrewing the bolts, the nuts and bolts to the sign in the front of the convention center. So that's off to you, man.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
So
well, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like you'd mentioned that I like the way you phrase it. You're uniquely unqualified to discuss the TV shows. Obviously, in the gaming industry, we've started getting a lot more into medias. We have wonderful podcasts like some ones that are out there. We have wonderful streams like the one that you're on currently. There's a lot of videos, a lot of audio, and things like that that are really starting to crop up. We're almost our own industry of the TV now as well.
Yes.
Are you involved in anything like that? Or do you consume media for the games much, or do you mostly just kind of in the play and run kind of end of things?
Yeah, not nearly as much as I would like. I have so many dear friends who are in have wonderful weekly podcasts and shows, and I dip in once in a while to catch up with them, but I don't watch them regularly. I'm also, I've got a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old too, so I'm, also coach youth sports, and I try to be a good dad and all that kind of stuff too. So it really is one of those things where it's, my wife's like, can you just close the laptop, at 10:30 at night or something like that. So yeah, okay, I probably should. And I just switched to my phone then, so yeah, it's a challenge with all that stuff. And I wish there were more time, and but I try to do the best I can with it. as you guys do too. I mean, let's not, I appreciate the kind words, but we all try to manage our days as well as we can, and it's an ongoing challenge. There's so much that we're presented with now that are potential time sinks. Like I completely want to buy the new Call of Duty Vanguard. I completely want to buy it, and I'm probably going to buy it. But I know it's going to happen. I'm going to buy it.
Pile of shame.
Can I really get into that? And I'll play a little bit, and so we'll see. And maybe it'll be interesting enough. It'll grab me that I'll actually divert some time to it. But
I can totally relate, though. I mean, it's like when you do something you love, you don't count the hours, and you just do it all the time. And some people go, my wife, your husband's a workaholic. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I haven't worked a day in my life since I started doing this. And they're like, you work like 7 days a week. And I'm like, yeah, and?
Well, the monumental task of putting together a quality hardbound, a big book like that it's such a big project. It's, I've always flirted. I'm going to write a novel. That's really what I'm going to do at some point. But the more I do game design, and the more I, turn in 70,000 word projects and 130,000 word projects, I think, holy crap, that is going to take a major reshifting of my time allocation to be able to do that. Like I gotta almost quit my job or something's got to give to be able to do something like that, because I'm so impressed with I'm fortunate my friends, and some of them are best-selling authors, and when I talk to them about what they do and how they do it, I mean, to say it's a full-time job is such an understatement. So
well, these guys have seen it here. Like we're getting Children of Eru out the door as we speak now, doing fulfillment for our last Kickstarter. And this has been, a 3-4 year project, from inception to writing to design to testing for, better part of 2 years, beta testing, open beta testing, and then just the whole rollout now with everything being, there it is, the print proof. The very few print proofs that are out in the wild, because right now we're suffering from the, what are they called? The fulfillment woes, where everything's stuck on a ship somewhere on a container. Pallets aren't getting delivered. Hubs are just congested with, stuff that needs to get from point A to point B, and just the waiting game. It's been a crazy 18 months.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting running a convention under those circumstances. That's for sure. I mean, it probably goes without saying that when you have a show called Gamehole Con, it wasn't started as a commercial venture. Right. I mean, because people would say, what the hell does that mean? That sounds creepy and weird. Why would I go to something like that? Right. And that's what a reasonable person's reaction would be. Because it's just my knucklehead friends and I who play in this room. This is the game hole. This is where I'm sitting. And that's why we called the show that. And so much to our surprise, the show, well, I guess I shouldn't say that. It has grown so quickly, so fast, that it's a little bit breathless with our efforts. Like we're full on right now, 2 weeks after the show, preparing for next year to have our systems in place to upgrade our back end of our website, to fix some problems that we had this year, because we're getting so many people trying to register at the same time, and other issues like that. Scalability is a real challenge. So, and then on top of it, with stuff like COVID and trying to keep everyone safe, and trying to not run afoul of public health, and for obvious reasons. I mean, we want everyone to come to our show for whatever circumstance, to be welcome and safe and happy. And this was a unique effort this year to try to make it work, and I'm delighted how well it went.
So, actually, just from all of that, I'm just kind of curious. Like, how did you even get into tabletop gaming in the first place? Like, what is the origin of that? I'm really curious.
Right, I can't quite see it on camera.
That the 1978 publication, or are we going a little earlier?
This is AD&D up here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in Madison, Wisconsin, Middleton, Wisconsin. D&D was born here in Wisconsin, in Lake Geneva. So I had the good fortune of being very close to where the stuff started being produced. So in my hometown, about an hour north of here, there was a 4-panel display of AD&D books in a freaking total department store. Like department store. It's not even in business anymore. It's in a small town called Portage, Wisconsin. No one, you'd have to be in, like New York City to see something like that, contemporaneous to this was in 1982. And I bought that copy, one of those, 6th printing of the Player's Handbook was my first book I bought, because I couldn't believe when I walked. I just remember it so clearly. I was 12 years old. I'm walking down. It was one of those things where I'm going with my mom through a department store, like, oh God, just being dragged around kind of thing. And it was a full like record needle on the record screech, full brakes pumped when I saw this display. Like, what is that? And I saw those beautiful books, Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Deities and Demigods, and they were each $15 a piece. I said, holy shit, I've got to mow a lot of lawns.
Yeah, I remember they were dirt cheap. Yeah, I think in my area they were like. I mean, yeah, people hear that now, like $14 for a book. That was crazy back then. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how. And so I bought the books, didn't really understand them, and then I buddy in 7th grade had the Mensner set, and he ran the B1, actually B2 for me. I was the player, he was the DM of sorts in the cafeteria.
Keep on the Borderlands?
Keep on the Borderlands. The two nerds of us, were doing that. And at the same time, I bought the original Traveler set, which I love. I adore Traveler. Again, couldn't figure out how to play it really. We're just building ships and screwing around and stuff like that. And then that tipped me into fantasy fiction, which really is where I spent a lot of time on, reading fantasy novels. And it wasn't really until I got into college, university, where I met other nerds that were my age that happened. Hey, did you play D&D back then? Yeah, I did too. And then we went off. Then that's when the epic campaigning really started. And so that's how. But that was that's ancient history now, man. That was like in the late 80s and early 90s when I was doing that stuff. So yeah, well, that's how.
Really interesting.
But Aaron, you missed out on the crazy collection in that game hall. So Rich and I got the pleasure of getting a tour there. Alex gave us a tour. Maybe Alex can move his camera around just a little bit for our audience. I don't know if it's possible with your setup there, just to give them a view of the game hall. So there's a huge, huge, huge shelf behind him of all of this vintage stuff that's bagged. Even the box sets are bagged.
Oh, that is beautiful. Holy.
And it looks almost like organized in chronological order.
Yeah,
by setting. And then then there's this glass case right there with the original brown boxes and white boxes that Gary was put out there. And this is what dates are we looking at there?
So the original brown box, the first printing was in 1974. So yeah, there are a handful of really big collectors in the world that have this kind of stuff, and I happen to be one of them. My claim to fame is that I have a complete set of everything that TSR produced in original shrink wrap. There are some friends of mine who have more manuscripts, and I have a few. I showed you guys too, I believe, the original Forgotten Realms maps.
Yep.
And I have the original known world maps. So I'm kind of the cartography guy, and also modules. So I love the AD&D modules. So I collected them very ferociously, and that's what you're seeing below me here. All those things. Stuff like those books. Those are all the AD&D modules, all the way through 1992, complete per printing and shrink wrap.
Yeah, I told Ed you had that really nice Forgotten Realms map out on the table when we came by and visited. And I told him we're going to have to keep the Athcliath city map originals that he's drafting up in his basement in good shape. Maybe you're going to end up knocking on his door one day for the city.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. That's the magic of this. I mean, that's what's the who knew, right? I have Lawrence Schick and Tom Moldvay's maps from when they're in college that they're playing. Which they called the known world when they're playing in college, just like we all did. And when TSR bought it, it became the Gazetteers, that based set on the Mystara campaign setting. They had no idea when they're screwing around in their dorm room that's how this was going to go. Certainly when Ed, drew, and Ed's a dear friend of mine as well, and so I've heard many times about how that came to be, how he drew the Forgotten Realms maps on sheets of 8.5 by 11, copied them, packaged them up, sent them to TSR. Jeff Grubb received them, followed Ed's instructions about how to put them together.
Mm-hmm.
Up they go on the wall, and that's how all the Forgotten Realms stuff that we all know and love was created.
It still hasn't changed that much. He's still sending
No.
me photos and scans of
No.
all of these city blocks, and I'm like, okay, so which ones are going where exactly? This one doesn't fit. Oh wait, I forgot to send you that city block. That's why that doesn't fit. Okay.
We don't need to turn this into a roast of our friend Ed, but I will say this. So,
I invited him to come on. Unfortunately, had a prior engagement, but he
Oh,
would have
okay,
loved to
well-
join us.
we'll do that some other time. Yeah, no, I haven't, I don't get a chance. He hasn't come down. I haven't seen him in almost 2 years now, which is a long stretch for me. Usually we get together more often. But so I've written a bunch of things with him, and what's the most amazing experience is we'll do a shared document of some sort. And instead of doing a web document, I realize I can't do that with him because it's too fast. So I have a saved Word document that I can work on, and I'll finish my work and I'll send it to him. Here's my 2,000 words I did. And I swear it's like half an hour later, it comes back.
He's so fast.
2,500 words, like, God, just give
Yeah.
me. That's why I can't do a shared document. It's like, it's like
so
sipping off a
fast.
fire hose, it's just, it's so prolific, and it's print ready, and it's good. And it's just such a pro. And I feel like such a hack every time I work with him, because it's just, he's so prolific. And his imagination is just, it's like, it's so explosive that it's daunting sometimes, but fun. So we've made some good stuff, and your book is lovely. Thank you for sharing a copy with me. I've had a chance to flip through it, haven't had a chance to read it thoroughly, but it's lovely.
Oh, nice, thank you.
Yeah, and the stuff that Ed and I have done is great. We're really close to being a launch one too. That we're just waiting for a little bit more art.
So that one is right above you. You can point above your right shoulder. There is an icon of Lands of the Red Wizards right there. Perfect. So tell us a little bit about Lands of the Red Wizards. That's coming down the pipe.
Yeah. So what's cool is that my friend Alan and Ed and I are all in a position where you think, well, let's just write stuff that we want to write. And I have a lot of friends that are at Wizards, and I reached out to them, and they were kind of tepid on it. They said, well, I don't know, because they're in a position where they're not excited about outside studios doing work with their IP at this point. For official Wizards releases. Okay, cool. So that then freed us to write Fae the way we really wanted to. That means we could introduce new character archetypes. We can basically bend you with the rules. There's a section on circle magic, for example, which Wizards would definitely not allow it if it was one of their projects. So basically, what it is, this book is going to show the Forgotten Realms fan what not only how the Red Wizards work, but what life in Fae is really like. We all know what the Red Wizards are, right? They're a fierce force, fearsome presence in the Forgotten Realms. They have their fingers in politics around the realms. But what is the average Thayan? What's their life like in different Tharches? Tharches are basically states in Fae. And this is what I was really excited about, is really to peel back the veil, and so people can see what actually life is like in Fae, and what it'd be like to live there, and what it'd like to be an adventure there. And it's a authoritarian controlled state, police state, but still has some wilderness, but not much. And so the adventure that I wrote for the book, it takes place in Eltabar, and it's a 100% urban adventure that has major political elements, because that's what it is. It's very powerful people that are playing the Game of Thrones constantly while trying to avoid the gaze of Zastam, and trying to stay out of trouble while trying to climb this political ladder. So it's a different kind of adventuring, and it's a different kind of setting. We're used to the plowing into the wilderness and cutting down monsters and grinding through dungeons. And there's still a thing there, but there's this whole other piece. It's more like Waterdeep than it is like anywhere else. Basically, a very complicated place with a lot of intrigue.
Politics and Cloak and Dagger.
Sounds really up my alley. I'm not gonna lie. I'm very interested. So, do you guys have like a general idea of like Kickstarter or anything along those lines, or?
Oh, it's going to be released as print on demand through the DMs Guild this year,
Nice.
certainly, and hopefully within, maybe even as quick as 30 days. It's been written. It is there. It's in layout. We're just waiting for art pieces, and now we're just throwing all kinds of art at it, because that's fun. And that's what's also great about it, because we don't we don't have to pay heed to a budget particularly. I mean, we don't want to go crazy, but but we're kind of going crazy. So it's going to be pretty lavishly illustrated, because why not, so I think it's going to be cool, and I think people are going to dig it, and I'm excited about, because this has been, Ed and I've been working on this thing for a while. As you guys know,
Yeah.
from inception to finish is about twice as long as you can ever possibly imagine in any project, and that's where we are with that.
And the funny anecdote is, remember when I reached out to you and I go, oh, yeah, Ed mentioned the book about fairies that you guys are writing together. And you were like, fairies? And then I couldn't figure out where the wires got crossed. And I'm like, and then I went back to Ed and I'm like, so what was that book you were telling me that you and Alex were working on? He goes, yeah, the Wizards of Thay. And then when he said Thay, I said, oh, wait, you must have said the Book of the Fae. I was thinking Fae.
Yeah,
And so, I was like,
you had me on roller skates with that one.
I was like,
I don't want to insult this guy by not saying what the hell is he talking about?
He had mentioned Fae, and I was like, okay, I guess they're writing something about the fairies of Faerun. Okay. But as soon as he said Red Wizards of Fae, and I was like, oh, wait, no, that's not Fae, that's They.
It's about
okay.
the complete opposite of that. There are so nothing.
So that was a funny story, yeah.
I'm excited for this because the Red Wizards, I started back in second edition. I wasn't old enough to start back when you guys did. But I started back in second edition, and I don't remember exactly which book it was, but they were referenced a few times. If there was one book that I read, and I was like, man, these guys sound amazing. And I just kind of over time fell in love with the Red Wizards, and every edition I've just kind of really appreciated them. And there's been a kind of a big lack of them in fifth edition, so I'm glad to see that they're finally getting some attention. So I appreciate that. There's one of my favorite villains, especially in the D&D kind of environment. So
well, I think that for myself personally, the opponent, the bad guy, if you will, that is more gray than just black and white is much more interesting. Someone who's more nuanced. They're not just bloodthirsty demons and all that. We okay, that's great. That's out there. Although there's plenty of products out there. Just go fight the demon hordes and all that kind of stuff. The ones, the opponents, the environment that you're operating in as a player character, where it's more nuanced and they have understandable motives that you may not agree with, but they're understandable. That's much more interesting.
Yeah, that was the creatures from fairy tale and myth. Pretty much all those creatures that you have within that book basically cover creatures that have their own motives and motivations that basically make them out to be, the villains in the fairy tale. But you can actually resolve a lot of those conflicts without actually having to raise a sword and decapitating them or getting yourself killed in the process, by just understanding what their motivations are, why they're there, and what they want. And, a lot of them are, capricious, and maybe you need to understand their etiquette. And that's why we had introduced also social combat. So how D&D has like tons and tons of, overhead when, okay, we'll roll initiative, and everyone kind of knows, okay, we're here for another 60 minutes when this fight's, after we rolled initiative. But when you got to do a charisma check to resolve like a huge negotiation between, okay, we're signing a treaty between these kingdoms, it's like, okay, do a charisma check. Because one roll will resolve everything. But we wanted to bring that same level of crunch because we thought it would go really well together with those creatures that are in the creatures from fairy tale and myth, which is, let's bring some crunch into that social dynamic between the creatures. So you can actually have this back and forth. We have to discover their secrets, use their secrets against them in that social combat. And take that to that next level of, if players want to roll dice, it doesn't necessarily mean that it can get crunchy without there being death.
Sure. And I think, I think that's well done, because that's a real blind spot for the various editions of D&D. It just is, it's D&D, quite frankly, is over time is a combat superhero game, really. I mean, if you boil it down to it, if from a game designer standpoint, that's really what it is. A game that I'm particularly in love with right now, that I think does a great job with all that, is Vaesen by Freeland. Vaesen is
that one.
That's a wonderful game, and it's that is all about, you are interacting with the supernatural, but really it's the people that are trying to manipulate them to ill are really your opponents, not these forces of nature. It's a very interesting sort of a alternative to Call of Cthulhu, because there's madness mechanics and all that kind of stuff, but it's not just, oh, you're Eldritch Horror, oh, you go insane.
It's more a psychological game rather than just a madness game. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually what, I'm this book I'm writing with Alan Patrick, one of the other authors for the Fae book. He and I are writing a book set in the Haunted Steppes, which is the Lost Lands setting for Frog God Games. They have this huge setting, we're exploring cosmic horror in D&D. And so we have a corruption mechanic, basically. That is, the more you encounter strange things, it affects you both negatively and potentially positively, depending on how you mesh with it. And as it's basically a math that goes up forward in the book, and at the end it has consequences, and that's been fun to play with, because just like you said, Andrew, the D&D doesn't handle all that, like all kinds of great rules of like how you're going to destroy something, right? And that's great. I mean, I just played D&D this afternoon with my friends. They're all WotC employees, and we play a 1-hour game over their lunch hour. And Mike Merles runs it, and it's a great game. But he's dealing with some stuff too with that. He's trying to push the boundaries of these rule sets a little bit. And there's no reason to have dogmatic approaches to these things. These things all can go where we want them to go, and it's a pretty exciting time in tabletop. And quite frankly, I mean, there's so much good stuff that's being made. Interesting. Like, I mean, I didn't meet you, till a year ago. And then you look at the great products that you guys are making, and that's tremendous. And there are all these stories that are out there. Of wonderful things that are being made right now, and that just wasn't the case 10 years ago at all. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there were a lot of people that were there for the first time also at Gamehole, and they had a great experience. And it's really nice to see the whole industry flourishing right now. I mean, every time we go to conventions, like one of my biggest joys is to go see the other game designers, the other authors, and see their booths and see what are the new Kickstarters that they're launching, what are their new products. And seeing them succeed is just making me happy, and backing them and boosting their signal on their projects is what I think really makes this industry unique and special, is that everyone really does cheer for each other's success.
Absolutely. And GameOCon, again, back to the theme of it not being obviously a commercial venture, is 100% about that. We are all gamers, the guys that run this the show. We love it, and this is just a service to the community. This is a service to the hobby that we love, and to attendees. We just wanted to make sure that we wanted to have a show where attendees got a top flight experience from start to finish, all the way through, where everything was as frictionless as possible. And we're continuing to work on that, and I think we're getting there. And that's why I always get asked, like, how is it that you have so many these industry people all want to come to your show? I said, well, I think because we made it easy. We made it fun. Imagine that, fun and easy.
Crazy.
I can see that from my side, having been there as an retailer. But yeah, coming there, a lot of the conventions that you go to feel like a bunch of guys are, okay, guys, we like gaming. How can we make money with our hobby? And Gamehole Con felt more like, pretty much what you just confirmed. It's a couple nerds sitting in the basement going, we really like gaming, but maybe we want to try out some other games. We want to invite some of our friends over. How can we get a whole bunch of people together so we can get a bunch of things going? What do we need to do to deliver that experience, as opposed to how could we make money from it, right? Because obviously, like you said, you mentioned a few times, it's not a commercial venture. And for anybody that hasn't been to Gamehole Con, little shameless plug for him, it absolutely delivers that experience. Just walking around, talking to the people. Obviously, Cave Geek and I, we all sat there with some, beverages that evening, and just realizing that everybody who's running this convention is just hanging out, and every one of them was just full of, oh man, I love this game and this game. We saw all of you walking through the vendor hall. Everybody that was there, everybody that I saw working the booze, I saw walking around the vendor hall at one point, checking out games, and half of them stopped by the booth. They're like, hey, what's your game about? We've heard some buzz, we've heard some excitement, it sounds really interesting, what can we do? and that's really really inspiring to see, and it's kind of a refreshing. You hear like, oh, breath of fresh air, but it was very refreshing to be in that environment where it was put on by people that obviously just wanted to have a gaming convention and aren't necessarily trying to make a bunch of money out of it. So it had a very good atmosphere, which was very appreciated, at least from my perspective.
I
Well,
mean, guys, we go to a lot of
So
conventions, right? And we hear about a lot of different cons. But I mean, when we went to GaryCon, how many times did we hear a plug for Gamehole Con?
the entire
Like
weekend.
hourly.
So on that note, as someone who didn't actually get to go,
uh,
like, can you give me like a little bit of like of the aesthetic, the vibe, a little bit, like what's like the events that are a little bit different and unique, probably from other cons? Like,
yeah.
I sadly couldn't leave Canada at the time, so
Sure. Well, yeah, I know we lost so much. I'm married to a Canadian, by the way, if I didn't mention that. So and basically sitting in Wisconsin, we're essentially Canadian anyway. But
yeah,
anyway,
basically.
yeah. So gosh, our big show here in Wisconsin always was Gen Con, right? Gen Con was here until the late 80s, and when it left for Indianapolis for very good reasons for their for-profit motive. 100%. Don't disagree with that at all. They made the right decision. Indianapolis is a better place for what they were trying to build. But that made us sad. And so when we started coming up with Gamehole Con, we thought, well, what's the show that we liked? Well, it's Gen Con, except for without a lot of the problems that Gen Con has. So I guess what I would say if I had to make an elevator pitch, it would be all the great things you can do at a big show. And we're not a small show. I mean, when you guys, we were down into this last year from 2019, but we still had 3,500 attendees or something like that. So it's not
really
tiny.
good.
Yeah, but no, in 2019 we're a little over 4, and I have absolutely no doubt that next year we'll be at 5 or something like that, because it just keeps growing. But that everything that you would like to do at a big show, meet the biggest people in the industry, play in the coolest events, play in True Dungeon, play in designer games. Well, you can't even do that at Gen Con because you won't get into those games, but you have a chance to do that here. In a really focused community where it's just tabletop gaming. There's not an anime section. There's not a this track, that track. It's really is just gaming. And we weren't trying to make it for like the gaming purists. We're trying to make it. We have lots of kids. We have lots of families who come because we try to make it fun for everyone. I mean, but the focus really is on tabletop gaming, board games, RPGs, and miniatures, and really nothing else. There's not a LAN room. There's not a room with movies playing and stuff like it. We just don't have that. It's all gaming. We have the largest Adventure League hall in the world. We have more Adventure League that gets played there, more than Gen Con, more than Origins, more than anywhere else. Huge.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
That's
it's
impressive.
the biggest one. It's the biggest one. So Wizards, there are two. Wizards sponsors 2 shows, ours and the group that does at Gen Con, the Baldwin Games, Dave Christ. That's it, because they realized, well, these are the only cats that are doing it right. So you can play in any kind of game and have these tremendous authentic gaming experiences, but also with a dealer hall that is, I mean, it's great. It's not as big as Gen Con, certainly, but it's a very robust dealer hall with all kinds of great vendors, and lots of other experiences. We do stuff like a paint and take, a free paint and take. People can sit down and learn how to paint miniatures and take them home with them for free. We have a massive games library that you come into and play, bigger than the one at Gen Con, for free. You can park at our show for free.
Huge.
Because we're trying
My
to
heart.
we're trying to make it so gamers can come and actually have that kind of experience without having to say like, oh my gosh, every step I take someone's shaking me down. And
And the lanyards are free.
where it is for, I get it, I get the corporate shows, they have a lot of employees and they have shareholders and stuff, and they're trying to make money. Great. It's just that we're just not that. That's why, Andrew, I'm sitting out there with a freaking wrench taking down the sign, because it's just us and my friends and I are putting this on, and we're trying to provide this experience without inflating badges costs, without adding these hidden charges, without all the things that we'd have to do to make it so I can not even be here when the show's being run.
Yeah,
That's
no,
just,
it's authentic, and people feel it, and that's
feels
where the
welcoming, really.
good word of mouth comes from.
Hmm.
I mean, I think the first time I heard about it was maybe even at Carnage. People had mentioned, because it has that kind of like small convention feel, but it's a mid-sized con.
Yeah, and it's going to be yeah, we'll see how this goes. I mean, there's never any plan, guys. I'm not kidding you for 1 minute, for one freaking minute, that we're going to say let's run this for 10 years or 20 years or forever. Let's run one and see how it goes. Okay, that was kind of cool. Let's do it again. And that's how it is. I mean, this has never been some sort of big plan, like we have some sort of bar graphs back in some central office somewhere where we're gonna like, all right. It's not. We're just trying to figure it out year to year. And as long as it's fun for us, that's always been. We sit around this table, we play here on this table. Someone sits in this chair once a week and we run games. And before we play, we often have a little game on top. Like, as long as it's still fun for everyone, we'll keep doing it. But the moment it's not, we're not, and then we're just going to be done. But fortunately, it is a lot of fun, and it's a lot of big experiences like this make it so. The joy that people have coming to the show, and the experiences they have there very much make it worthwhile, despite the fact that we, again, we're never gonna, well, it's possible we make money on it sometime, but I don't it's hard for me to imagine it, because we're just going to reinvest it back in the show and do something else, like buy some sort of animatronic dragon that flies over the show or whatever. We'll find some way to waste the money.
It's dice.
That's a question for you. What are you doing with that beholder that you guys created for the mascot? Where does that go after the show?
Yeah, see, that's not mine. See, I'm a minority, so that's True Dungeons.
Oh, is it? Okay. I was wondering.
Yeah.
I thought you guys had made that. It was your mascot for the year or something, because it was part of your logo. I
Oh, yeah,
noticed, right?
It did dovetail nicely. So no, I'm one of the owners of True Dungeon.
Okay.
It's Jeff and Lori Martin and myself, and so since we're business partners and friends, Jeff said, "Hey, I've got this beholder."
Oh, you guys started? You're part of the original, like the inception of True Dungeon?
No, I'm not part of this.
Okay.
I've been
Okay.
an owner for about 5 years or something
Okay.
like that. No, yeah, they've been doing it for years, on their own at starting at Gen Con, and for years we're only at Gen Con.
Okay.
But anyway, Jeff told me, he said, "Hey, I've got this beholder socked way away in one warehouse. Should I bring it?" I said, "Yeah, hell yeah, do it, bring it." So that's why. So yeah, they've got amazing stuff. They're located in Carbondale, Illinois, where they have warehouses full of unbelievable stuff like that they've been building and buying in the haunt industry to populate these great dungeons that they do for our show and Gen Con and others. So yeah, that's where it came from. But yeah, that's what's great. I mean, so that's part of what I'm saying, is that you can come and see stuff like that usually a show like even Origins, which is we're approaching that size. We're getting closer. They're sort of more of our size of show. They don't have stuff like that, because you can't afford to go build a beholder. I mean, that's so yeah,
it does sound a little expensive. So like, this is actually, I'm curious, because I've done a lot of show running myself and other stuff. What would you say, as someone who started running conventions, and one thing you wish you knew before you started? Just I'm very curious.
Well, yeah, that's good. That's a really good question. So when we started this, the good thing that happened is that we approached it with enough humility that we recognized our own ignorance and asked everyone who would tell us anything, give us any advice, any guidance on how to do this, and still do. Like, we're learning things every year. Like, why didn't we do that instead of this? This is so stupid. We could just cut right there, and so we're constantly learning. So I guess I wish I had, when we had the first year at the Madison Sheridan, would have appreciated that we would have grown as quickly as we would have, because then we would have scaled a little differently. Because it's just been like, whoa, it's a little bit that way with when you run an event that is all volunteer, with people like myself and the rest of the guys who are full-time employees, full-time work somewhere else kind of jobs, professionals with kids and so on. So it's not, no one has 20 hours a week to spend on this. With a venture that grows on average between 35 and 40% a year, it's a little nutty. So that's, but fortunately we learned that quickly, and now we're taking steps. So basically there's no off season. That's why, today I literally had an exchange with a couple of guys about, we need to get our, which you guys will be interested in, our prospectus out for next year. So people who want to, because we're constantly getting messages, when can I renew my booth? When can I just
already?
Give me a minute. Just give me a minute.
We'd like the exact same one again, please.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, it just is. So if we can, so that's the other thing is with, I'm a trialer. That's what I actually do for a living. And the secret, it's not, I would like to think I'm a reasonably smart person, that I'm capable and a good trial lawyer. But the key to putting on a good trial and to winning your case is preparation. It's just preparation. Just like anything else, if you're going to give a speech or going to do any project, put on any production, it's all about the preparation, how much time you spend making sure it's going to be right. And that's what it is. If you're going to run a convention or any event like that, just prepare. Don't think like, oh my gosh, our event's 2 months away, we better start thinking how we're going to put this together. That's insane. You've got to get this lined up and have everything. And especially, Andrew,
I've been to some of
those. Yes, we all have. That's why we ran our show. Like you go to registration, like, oh, you don't have my badge? Where's my game? You don't know? There's no game master there. We're like, what's going on? We've all done that. And we didn't want to, we all learned how not to do it.
We've shown up to conventions, without naming names, that are much bigger, that have been doing it a lot longer than you have, and we've had surprises where where's our table, where are our chairs, and there's no one to contact, and everyone's kind of like hands in the air, shrugging, looking at each other, going like, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
No badges? What do you mean you ran out of badges? You guys have been doing this for 20 years? How do you run out of badges?
What do you mean I don't get tables with my booth? It's like
Yep, I know, man.
Not naming anyone, though.
I know. Okay. It's and that's the thing. So it's, you have this range. What we've found is that there's this there are two types of shows: the small kind of half-assed thrown together thing where you go and you're like, well, things are gonna be screwed up, but we know that. That's cool. You misspelled my name. All right, great, whatever. And then the sort of the bigger corporate shows, which are indifferent in the way that you're talking about, where it's like, well, we don't have someone who can actually answer that question here. I'm just a volunteer. I don't know. So, there's got to be something in between there.
Yep.
There's got to be competency with authenticity. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. That's where we're trying to get to, is that we can have a seamless experience for everyone, that's fun, but still is professionally run. That can't be impossible.
No, it comes down to the people too, getting the right people for the right jobs. So I mean, Aaron Bagelman, I'll never forget you, and when you found out we were bringing Mjolnir to the booth, and you were the weapons master at Comic-Con, and everyone started complaining about the Vikings with the 120-pound Mjolnir at the booth, hefting it over people's heads.
Yeah, and
you handled it well.
They were like, oh no, it's a dangerous weapon. I'm like, if anyone can swing it, I'm more scared of what they can do with their fists. So it's like, there's like a limitation to logic. But yeah, I really appreciate that answer. That really resonates with me a lot. It really does come down to the dedication, pre-planning, and thought that you put into it, because at the end of the day, that's where you're going to achieve. That's where you're going to be able to just make a good show. So I like that a lot. All right, so I do have another question here, but I have.
While you're looking, I want to circle back to one of your projects that dealt with Rappaneathic, one of my favorite dungeons for 3rd edition. So you wrote a intro adventure that kind of leads into Rappaneathic 1. Want to tell our audience a little bit about that adventure before we wax poetic about this mega dungeon?
Sure. So Rappaneathic, as you know, presupposes that you show up at the front gates at 4th level. You're like, hey, ready to go into the grinder,
and don't go down the well.
Yeah, down the well. Exactly. That's exactly their expression. So they had Zalcor's Ferry was a creation by Matt Finch, and he kind of had it roughed out, but not really detailed. And so when they re-released Rappin, Bill Webb reached out to me and asked me if I'd be willing to write an adventure developing this town a little bit with a few NPCs that are already known. And I said, sure, what the hell, So I had, my job was to get, like Huckleberry Finn on his raft that comes into town to 4th level, right? So like green as grass adventurers to be ready to go face the horror that is wrapping up. And a lot of those, I've designed a bunch of stuff over the years, and some of the more hard things are early level things without doing the same things that everyone else has done, being original without being too tropey is really difficult, I think, but it's also rewarding, but you really have to spend some time in it. People think, oh, write a 1st level adventure, that's easy. I don't think it's easy at all. I think it's actually quite hard.
And you're the welcome mat for the entire dungeon, right? Like this is the first experience people are going to be running through is your opening doors, right?
Yeah. If it sucks, you may be closing off the whole product. I mean, that's so anyway. Yeah. So,
no pressure.
So I appreciate that they're willing to have me do it. So basically what it is it's its own module basically that has a non-linear set of encounters that so the dungeon master can organically throw these things at characters at the party as they sort of figure out, like, why the hell are you here? What are you doing? You want to go to Rapid? You want to go to the, okay, so, but wait a minute, just take a moment here, and then these things happen. The dangers that spring up in Zelkor's Ferry, they get swept up in defending the town and things like that. And before they know it, you're 4th level and you're actually ready to maybe survive a few minutes in the mega dungeon. So that's how that came to be. And yeah, that was a fun one. That was a couple of years ago, and I haven't. I'm glad you're asking me about it. Actually, I haven't. It hasn't come up in a bit. I hope that people are still out there playing it, because it's that's an iconic mega dungeon.
Yeah, I played it when it was first released for 3.0, and I picked up your adventure later just to flip through it. And I was curious, like, where the name Zelkor came from, because obviously it was in the dungeon, but what was the the lore, why it was above world lore. And the vibe that I was getting was kind of like the Apocalypse Now kind of, you're going down the river into like no man's land. Things are just getting wilder and wilder, and you're hearing crazier and crazier stories as you're going into, uncharted territories. And oh man, that mega dungeon! What did we have a crazy time doing that one? I think we did the first levels in 3rd. We did the 2nd installment at 2nd edition, and then we finished the last installment in 1st edition. So we basically wanted to take on Orcus back in AD&D stats with AD&D characters. So we did a whole retrofit just for shits and giggles for everyone's gear and everything.
Well, so I'll show you this right here. Is my buddy Doug Niles' Bloodstone Pass. That's Bloodstone series, the H series of modules where, the H4 is the Throne of Bloodstone, where you would fight Orcus in
Welcome to Solar getting tortured. Yes. Opening scene, right?
Yep. And so it's cool. I like how that what's neat about it, as opposed to the other mega dungeons like Undermountain or so on. It's organic in that it's evolved. It keeps changing, and it gets rewritten, so leaving aside the problems of mega dungeons, which is a whole nother subject, right? The believability and all that kind of stuff. Like, let's just way past that. That's the part of the thing I had to deal with in Zelkor's Ferry is like, why the hell are they there? Why would you be here? And that was a little bit of a challenge. So that's why, that Apocalypse Now kind of thing that you're describing is exactly what I was trying to accomplish, that you're kind of just pushing into the wilderness and as young adventurers, green adventurers, to see what the hell happens, what's going on. And you find this interesting town and things are happening. And then you learn about this place on the mountain that might be interesting to explore. So that's the Zelkor's Ferry story, such as it is.
Awesome.
So segueing from that, actually, I'm curious, like, so how did you get yourself like started in design and author work in the industry? Like, what was like your origin point for that? Because I understand you were a gamer, you kind of went to college. So what is that in between? Because there's obviously that and your law work and such. So I'm curious.
Sure. No, that's a good question because that's, I face that question. Like, how do you start designing games? How do you start writing games? Well, you just start writing games.
Just like that. All right, there you go.
Well, it is. It's just like, if you want to write a book, you start writing a book. There's no preparation to do it. You just have to start writing. And for those who want to write adventures, be they whatever setting, if it's D&D or anything else, you just got to start writing and putting pen to paper. And that's what I did, is that so I'm, as a lawyer, I'm essentially a professional writer. So I was pretty sure I could spin the word, but I wasn't sure about the D&D part of it and other systems. So I just started, and I wrote a module of an intro adventure called Brain Gorger's Appetite, because it's a third-party product. So that was the Brain Gorger is my take on a mind flayer. That's not invading an IP. So Wizards, if you're listening, there's a fifth tentacle. There's a fifth tentacle on that Brain Gorger. It's not a mind flayer. And I wrote that, and I sent it, and I'm also fortunate in my friends. I sent it to Chris Perkins, who took a look at it for me, and he said, it's cool. I like what you've done here. You need an editor. An editor. Interesting. So he introduced me to Scott Fitzgerald Gray, another Canadian, who does a lot of the editing for most of the Wizards books, and he's been a tremendous help for me through my career now over the last 10 years or whatever I've been doing this, with the various products I've written. And you just get better at it. You start writing, and you craft some stuff, and you look back, you're like, well, that wasn't. You look back the stuff you wrote 5 years ago, like, and it's an evolution. It's a process, but you do have to start. I mean, that's what I would, I've done the how to start, with D&D or adventure writing, and I don't have much to say. Start.
Yep.
Just do.
And editors are the unsung heroes of our industry as well.
They so are.
Yep.
They so are, because you have to be, especially if you're an editor for gaming, you have to not only be an editor in all the classical sense of the word, but you also have to understand gaming and also the rules and all. I mean, these people that's a real niche skill set, and good ones are treasured. So yeah. So that's how it's not a really good answer, but it just is, start splashing around, and write some stuff, run it for people, see if they like it. And if there's something that you've written and the players do something else, that's okay. That's always going to be the case. And write something that's very linear to start. I know it's a bad word now to say railroad. Write a railroad to start, and then expand from there, because it's when the trick of I think writing good adventures is giving the illusion of choice, and where you have choice and actually meaningful choice too, but you're always going to get them back to where you need to be, because you're trying to tell a story at the end of the day. It can't be a complete sandbox. There has to be some linear progression through an adventure. And it can be attenuated. It could be a long time down the road, but you gotta, that balance is really where that distinguishes good adventures from great adventures, in my opinion. That can do that.
I respect that. Okay. And then another question to actually follow up on that is, so like, you've created stuff. What is your favorite that you worked on? Like, if you were to choose, not to make you choose one of your favorites. I understand favoritism, between children can be hard,
Yeah.
We won't tell your books, I promise, but
yeah. So I think, at this point, my favorite is Sea King's Malice, because it was my first big hardbound book that was in game stores, with my name on it, which was just such a humbling moment, just like, that's, that was and it still is a big deal for me when I go into, I'll be in some city and I always say, well, do they have, and oh my gosh, look at that, like, oh, I can't even believe it, so that's the one for me. That's that. And I know I have other things that are coming, and they'll probably, they are bigger, and I've had other releases that were bigger with other publishers, but that one, because of the distribution, I've run into that stuff like out in LA and stuff like that, and I see my book and I always make my friend take a picture, like a nerd. I still can't get over that. I'm just such a fanboy of the whole industry that the fact that I get to be included in it, even my little piece, this little wedge on the side, is just literally a dream come true for me. So
I can appreciate that. I have a sentient shovel in a book. It was my creation, and it has a very special place in my heart. So I could definitely understand that for sure.
Cheers to you. Then. That's great. That's yeah.
Thank you.
Because a lot of our
Now-
hijinks end up getting into our books as well. So a lot of whenever my players end up getting their copies of the books, they just immediately start flipping through. And they're like, okay, where the hell are the magical items that we came up with? Where the heck are the crazy story arcs that we went on? Like that's part of I guess the benefits of putting up with all the beta testing is that some of your crazy stories end up in print at the end.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing about playtesting. That's always, I go to. I'm fortunate enough to be invited to a bunch of shows as an industry person and I run my stuff, and I'm amazed at what I learn. I'm always amazed. Man, Kammer, you really screwed that up, man. This is clearly, fortunately I was the one running it, so I could pretend as I'm running it. Oh, sure, this is, and I hastily run back to my laptop, like bang out wow, what a blind spot that I had there. Like if the players only do this, it totally screws up this entire narrative, and so that
speaks to testing. We need to test.
And
yeah, there are products that clearly don't meet the testing rigmarole, and they get released. They fall flat on their face, and unfortunately, they just get dragged through the mud in reviews afterwards, and it's just not worth it. Like whoever's listening with Kickstarters, take longer. Take an extra month. Take another 6 months. Your fans will understand. It's better to put out a good, solid product that you've tested. Your fans will understand why you took longer, rather than you rush it out. No one was going to remember that you rushed it out 6 months early. They're going to remember what's in print on the shelf now.
Yeah. And if you have the luxury to allow other people to do it too, to give your product to friends and even not friends, and just trust in the fact that people are decent. Yeah, and just that they'll go run and come back to you with comments. That's invaluable. I mean, this is why, quite frankly, 5th edition is such a wonderful product. It's because that was the most rigorously play tested released RPG that's ever been released. Was far more play tested than any other product ever in the history of our industry. And this is why it's been that you could argue, well, does the Ranger suck and stuff like little criticisms like that. But overall, it's very balanced and really well done, and the math works. And now that we're at the more and more products are being more and more exceptions to the rules are being published. So now you could say, well, now things have spun out of control a little bit, and that's the nature of publishing, and that's why undoubtedly we'll get a 6th edition here before we know it.
So what are your thoughts on that? 5.5 versus a 6. What are your predictions if you're going to look into your crystal ball with all your connections and little birds on the branches whispering in your ear?
What are my predictions, or what do I know? Those are two different things.
What are you allowed to say? What are you allowed to say?
Yeah. Well, here, there's just first of all, the overarching principle is that publishers publish, right? So there's going to be a new edition. There has to be eventually. And anyone who's upset about that fact doesn't understand the reality of being a publisher. Right? You have to produce new product. You can only hang on to a rule set for so long if you're going to continuously publish exceptions to your rules. And there's no better example of that than Pathfinder, right? Just the rules bloat is crazy in that game. I like Pathfinder. I enjoyed it. I ran Pathfinder for years. They had a ranking system for their organized play. I can't remember. It was a few years ago. There's venture captains and all that kind of stuff. So I was running games for them at Gen Con and so on. And it got to a point where I would sit down to run a game, and the players would tell me what their character classes are, and I have no idea what the hell they were. I'm like, you're a what? And that's when I realized, okay, it's time for me to exit stage left on running organized play for them. And that's, so that's why they did a 2nd edition, and undoubtedly that's why D&D is going to do another edition as well, in addition to trying to gin up more sales. But there absolutely will be a 6th edition. There's just absolutely no doubt about it. If you have any dreams or fantasies to the contrary, I think the really interesting question though is, will there be a new Pathfinder that's not Pathfinder, but it's taking the OGL from 5th edition and going that way. And there are plenty of candidates who could do that, including all of us. That's basically what we're doing. It's we're running writing third party product. Is there going to be someone who, or someone's publishers who are, say, put the flag in the ground and say, we are not leaving 5th edition behind.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to continue to write great product for this rule set because it's great.
There'll be quite a few, I'm sure.
There will be, and that's
sure.
I think that's going to happen, and that's I think Wizards is in a very interesting position that way, that they have they've created a great rule set universally. I mean, there's only the real haters don't like 5th edition D&D, and it's not because of the actual rule set itself. It's they just have emotional reasons or nostalgic reasons or whatever. That's fine, but given all the new. Yeah, right. And all the new players that have been brought into the hobby because of 5th edition. It's a massive market. And so to say, all right, we're going to scrap 5th edition, go to 6th edition, which is undoubtedly going to happen at some point. That's going to create a massive opportunity, and people are already positioning for it. And I'm going to be interested to see how that all shakes out. So for those who like 5th edition D&D, there's no just like people like 3.5, right?
You can stick with it. Like, it never goes out of print, right? An old edition will never ever go out of print, so there's no reason to get upset. And Pathfinder 2, for all the hating that it's gotten, I'm a big fan of their action system. I think they streamlined 3rd Ed and 5th Ed's action system brilliantly with just the 3 actions. And casting a spell costs 2 actions. It's simple. It's so easy to teach. That's my one big hurdle I've always had with 3rd Ed and 5th Ed, teaching new players, full round actions versus partial actions versus free actions versus, free 5-foot step, acts of opportunity. Like, if someone never played an RPG, their head's spinning. They're like, I don't know what I can do on my turn. Can you please explain it to me with visual aids?
So the Rise of the Rune Lords is one of the greatest adventures ever published, I think, and I don't think it gets the credit as it should, as far as just being a magnificent adventure arc. So in the game hole, we rotate the DM chair, which is a little unusual. I'm not always the DM. We rotate. So I ran the first book of that adventure pass and the last, which is again a little weird, but that's how we do it. And the problem was that as you climb the tower at the end, the details aren't important, but there's a battle that can happen. If things don't go the right way, all these giants come rushing forward. We spent 3 hours playing 12 seconds of actual game time because that's how complicated it was. And that's just the nature of high level gaming when there's all kinds of rule stuff that happens. So I understand why people step away from it. And this is why, for me, I'm actually running and playing less D&D than I ever have. I am a huge fan of the Free League games. I mentioned Vaesen earlier. I love Forbidden Lands. I love Alien. I love Mork Borg. These are great games.
Yeah, when we were there, you were really fanboying out on Aliens. I remember,
totally
yeah.
I totally am. I love it.
I'm playing Aliens right now, so I feel you. It's a great game.
All right, cool. And this is what's interesting about our hobby now. Our RPGs have been such a tiny little industry that now there's actually a slightly less than tiny industry. It's a little bit bigger, that there's room for these other publishers to actually make great games and make some money doing so. So, I mean, keep an eye on Free League. They've climbed up. They're past Peso as far as, the number of sales in RPGs. And so there's going to be other ones like that, that say, okay, D&D is great. How about a D6 system that's really simple? Look what's happening with the Mothership Kickstarter right now. Things going crazy. There's a lot going on that is not D&D, but is RPGs, really good RPGs. And that's what's exciting to me. I just love that stuff. I'm not super interested in learning a really complicated rule set that's got but if you've got something that you can tell me in 10 minutes or less, I'll play that.
Right.
Savage Worlds. We love Savage Worlds. We love Call of Duty. We play all those games.
So speaking of non-D&D stuff, have you heard about our box set coming up, Ath Cleath?
I have not.
And I mean, Andrew would probably be better at this than me.
Well,
so.
Cleath, that's the city Ed and I have been working on for the last year. It's the system agnostic city that's going to be set in the Fate of the Norns Ragnarok universe. So our universe is historically and mythologically set kind of in the 10th century, around 930 AD, and during the second age of Ragnarok. We're going to be about the second age of Ragnarok at that point. So it's too late to stop the end of the world. We're pretty much eyeballs deep in the apocalypse. And this city is very interesting because we've got three cultures that are slamming together. You've got the Christians, you've got the Vikings, and you've got the pagan Celts. And the Christians have already been there for several centuries, so there's kind of like a transition that's been going on. But the Vikings have come in the last decade, and they took over Dublin, which is Athgoliath, and they declared war on the rest of the island of Eriu. And the High King basically rallied all of his kings to one big battle against King Citric, and this happened around 920, and they basically lost the battle. And so now the Vikings are in charge of an island they don't have the manpower to control. And so this is a very, very kind of like when we were talking about, the Red Wizards, like this is very, very cloak and dagger, a lot of diplomacy, a lot of things happening behind the scenes in terms of politics between the Celtic nobles, the missionaries. There's a whole cabal of crusaders that are ready to like move into the island from Wessex. And there's also everything that's happening in the heavens. So it's not just on the historical side of things, but you've also got the pantheons. So you've got the Celtic pantheon, Norse pantheon, and the White God, which, and so
you guys are using the UK island, basically. You were using that as the geography.
pretty much, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, cool. I dig it.
Yeah, so this is going to be droppable into like pretty much anyone that wants to have like a historical kind of setting that's very like Celtic or Viking in terms of theme. So people played Skyrim and want to be like, oh, I want an RPG setting that's that kind of setting, but they don't really want to get bogged down in the history or whatnot. Like they can just grab something like throw this in the game. And for us to be able to reskin this for multiple systems is very, very easy the way we're kind of designing this. We're going to actually throw in like a light set of rules and character creation for Ragnarok in there. This could even be a jumping off point for someone who just wants to start our system with this box set. So that's the next big Kickstarter with a whole bunch of other stuff wrapped with it. So
yeah, well, a box set is ambitious. I mean, that's a challenging product to put together. So that's fantastic. I love box
exactly
sets.
So it's like I was going to point behind you. I don't know how to point behind you, but I was always a huge fan. Like I used to have the Forgotten Realms ones. Before that I had the Greyhawk ones, and I understand why they stopped making them, because back then the boxes were so flimsy and there was so little content in there that the moment you put your heavy books on top, the whole thing just collapsed. Like it's just destroyed. And when I talked to Ed, he was saying, yeah, that was the big problem. They'd ship them to shows, half the stock would be destroyed, and they'd have so much loss that it'd be a big problem. And I said, well, everything's changed now with the Kickstarters, now with board games. Most of the board games boxes, you can toss off a 15-story building, they'll land on the sidewalk, and the contents will be just fine inside. And you can get them just down to the right size with all the content that's inside. And I just miss those box sets. Just the wonder of opening them with the fold-out maps and the booklets and the adventures, like one card per adventure. Just take one sheet and you've got an adventure ready to go.
For the old school box sets, the gold standard has always been the Empire of the Petal Throne box set. That is the best maps, best quality box, better than all the traditional D&D stuff, EPT, which TSR released. I have to
confess, I don't have that one.
Yeah, that one's a little bit of a rare. That one's you have to, but it's a beautiful box set. It's the Professor Barker's setting and all that. But yeah, that's cool. I have a Call of Cthulhu scenario I wrote a couple of years ago explaining why the Antonin Wall failed. So I dig it. I'm a big early British history fan myself. I was very close to going forward and finishing my master's and PhD in history. Instead, went to law school for various reasons. So I spent I splashed around in a lot of that area that you're talking about. So I'm a big fan of that. So I'm
Maybe we can rope you in to
Yeah, I'm
write a
excited.
one-page adventure for the box set. We're looking at
that's
stretch goals right now, so we might be
Oh,
looking
yeah.
at some stretch goals for written by some nice industry people.
Yeah, you want some nutty Celtic thing, that's
Absolutely, especially
I spent a lot of time
if
researching the lore. Yeah, yeah,
so this
yeah.
is like like the post-Roman area. Like this is like second, third century.
Yeah. So what I was doing was why did they fall back from the Ensign Wall, which is basically the Highlands and Lowlands? Why did what caused the Scots to overrun the Ensign Wall, and fall back to Hadrian's Wall?
Right.
Um, I came up with an explanation for that that is obviously not historically accurate, but it's
Okay.
very much with the old elder gods and mythos and stuff. So, but that's what, yeah. So,
But that's what basically created this whole swath of Northumbria up there, right?
mhm.
And the Vikings basically exploited that whole region. They went from Jorvik to Altklute and then over to Athgoliath. So it's just a whole interesting historical aspect that we've drawn into the setting. And there's so many interesting historical facts that are, you can't make this stuff up, and it's just so entertaining. And it's a breath of fresh air. Like a lot of people will read our stuff and they'll be going like, this does not sound like high fantasy, like your standard fantasy tropes. And that's kind of what we're aiming for with a lot of our writing. Ed's like, that's his wheelhouse as well. He loves that old stuff. Like we talked about top of my tongue. Poul Anderson, the author from what is it, the 50s?
Yeah.
60s? Yeah, like right after Tolkien's period or C.S. Lewis. A lot of them that were drawing from mythology and had that like really, really nice, unique spin before we ended up getting to these like high fantasy tropes that later came with like David Eddings and the other authors that, Gen X all grew up with.
Exactly. Well, that's great. I'm excited to hear that. That's yeah. Yeah, can't wait. That's a Kickstarter that's going on now.
No, that's going to be launching imminently. So right now,
Okay.
I'm at the mercy of the shipping companies to fulfill the last Kickstarter. It's kind of my philosophy of until I'm shipping out my last Kickstarter, I will not launch my next one. So this one's been held prisoner for about 6 months, as everything here has been grinding to a halt with fulfillment. Just getting the print proofs from the printers has been an ordeal. Normally, it'd be like a 3-week turnaround time, and now it's been 3 months for print proof,
I know.
which
Hey,
is I've never
I'm
seen this
working,
before.
I'm working on our Gamehole Con 22 plushie right now. I get it shipped hopefully in December,
Ship now.
so I can get it right. So I can get it in time for October of next year, which is insane, really. I mean, that's just a wild timeline to have to operate on. But that's the world we live in, apparently.
Or we manufacture locally. I mean, that's kind of the
Right.
paradigm shift that we all have to start thinking about. And
Yeah.
today I just ended up getting, I've got a bunch of like brochures here from a Quebec printer I'm looking to actually print locally my books, because it's just some of these delays are going to be pretty unacceptable, especially our next Kickstarter is not just the box set. We have an anthology of another 7 books that are bundled with this box set.
Printing
And
you can do, like I would decide we could talk about this online. I feel like we're having a private conversation, but
no,
with Castles and Crusades, the Troll Lords have a full-on printing operation. They can handle lots of things. I would completely reach out to Steve Chenault.
okay.
He printed a bunch of stuff for me for that reason, and he's in the southern United States. That's a but
No, definitely send me his contact info. And yeah, this is totally the topics we do cover, because there's a lot of industry people that actually do watch our streams, like probably Jay's watching and stuff. Other indie publishers that are
Sure.
we're all sharing the same woes, and we talk about them all the time. Like some of these guys were past guests on the show, and yeah, like we try to help each other out. So if someone's got like a lead on a very solid, let's say manufacturer in China, hey, these guys have delivered 5 times in a row 5 stars. I highly
Yeah.
recommend them. Like give
Yeah.
it to your friends too.
Yeah,
And it also helps out them. So
Yeah.
the companies that are actually, doing it properly. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the problem that we have found ourselves in with this kind of like half globalization economy. We haven't quite gotten, it's just, we're sort of stuck in that in some things we just don't have options, at least I think printing is going to go back there. I think it would be great. I would much rather deal locally with all things in all respects, every aspect of my life if I could. And I think printing was going to get there sooner than some of the, like a complicated plushie like I'm trying to build.
Yeah.
That's going to be a bit, because we just don't have that. We've basically, in the United States, you guys we've essentially abdicated all that production. And it's just crazy to me. And I don't, we're not going to I'm not going to wind myself into a political conversation here, but it's rough that way to see that we can't do things like that, and it shouldn't be like, I just need 1,000 toys and I can't get them made anywhere. I mean, that's nutty to me. But hopefully we'll get back there. And I think printing was going to get there before that.
Well, in Canada, it's ridiculous. We were, I think, the capital of pulp and paper mills in the world.
Yeah.
In terms of pulp and paper mills.
Absolutely.
We now ship our lumber to China and they ship paper back to us. That's how crazy this has gotten.
Yeah, that seems like a solvable problem to me.
Yeah.
That seems solvable. But I get it. These are complicated things, and a lot of fingers in different pies that are trying to, everyone's paid, and so I understand it's not that simple. But yeah, well, I hope that if we can get a locally produced box set, that would be tremendous.
That would be kind of the goal. And I think Pod is one of the things that kind of revolutionized our industry as well, print on demand. So Kickstarter was one of them. It democratized the entire access to the market. So you didn't have to go through Hasbro or Milton Bradley with your idea of like, oh, I want to do a Viking RPG. And they're like, what's your audience? I don't know, 30,000 people. It's way too small. Forget it. You're not getting through. Now Kickstarter, all the gates are open. And now with print on demand, it's okay, I only need 3,000 copies of something. You don't need to go do an offset print run of 10,000 copies of something. You can say just-in-time inventory. Say, I need one copy that just sold, shipped out to this person, and that's it. So we're really in a renaissance period for our industry as well, technologically.
There's a great company here in Madison that's called the Game Crafter, and what
Yes.
they do is that what you're exactly describing for board games.
Yeah.
Where they do a POD process for board games. So if you want to do one board game, you want to develop a killer metal box set board game just for you, you can do that, or anything in between. With the components, cards, meeples, whatever you want to do, and design, what those fonts look like, all customizable. And it's pretty sweet. It's on the east side of Madison, and I've walked through. It's a great facility, and a very cool guys who are running it, and it's pretty sweet to see that they took this at that time when they started, pretty weird idea really to compete with Milton Bradley or Hasbro or whoever, because all the shit that gets dumped on Target and stuff like that.
But their first audience was prototypers, right? So it was like industry people like us that would say, I've got this board game and I've outgrown my cue cards that I've written the cards on and my pieces of paper that I've cut up. I need to go to the next level of prototyping to now create boxes that I can ship to people for beta testing. And that's what I ended up using for one of our board games that's still in the Kickstarter pipeline, yet to be kickstarted, that they've helped out tremendously. And even 2 card games, one yet to be kickstarted and one already kickstarted, they helped out with. So I would definitely second, a recommendation for the Game Crafter. Fantastic company.
This pile of stuff right here, these are custom maps that I built through the Game Crafter, which is for the R2 module actually. So what I was doing, I wanted to have tiles to sort of create a fog of war, so I could just lay them out as I ran them at shows. And this is probably 10 years ago I had those made, and there they sit. So as the characters move down a quarter, I could lay out the next section. That was not a thing that existed. I mean, you could print it with paper, but you couldn't print on a cardboard. And so that's something you do at the Game Crafter too. You could take your RPG map and print it any way you want, and have it broken down any way you want. And so it's pretty cool that that's now a service that's available.
That is actually pretty awesome. So I don't mean to be that person. I've been really enjoying this conversation, but I know the editor is going to be very upset with me if I don't, I'm the editor. Let's just be honest here. So I do have to wrap this up. It's been absolutely fantastic having you. These conversations have been fantastic. You're like, I don't know if I'm just going ahead of myself, but you're more than welcome to come back. Like this was great. What we like to do at the end of each episode is we just kind of take whatever drink we happen to have in hand and we just kind of go skull to the camera. And so if you'd like to join us, you're more than welcome. And thank you so much for watching, guys. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And skull.
Cool.
Cheers.